Hello and welcome back to Lightworker Training. My name is Tatiana and the topic of today's video is, I have to look at my notes, rewriting trauma-based programs. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because based on my personal experience and professional experience, unresolved trauma is at the core of all of these other symptoms that we see manifested as problems or painful things in our lives, in our physical bodies, emotional bodies, mental bodies, spiritual bodies. If we peel back the layers and we trace the symptoms all the way back to the root cause, in my experience, there is always some unresolved trauma that would like to get some love and attention and come to a place of resolution. So I've been sharing with you in these last few videos about the importance of this, and that's why it's in the Foundations playlist, because understanding how trauma imprinting works, how it creates these programs and loops that we continue to run, these patterns in our lives, and understanding how we can break those patterns, rewrite the trauma-based programs, and create something new is absolutely key to this work. This work being Lightworker Training, where we're looking at healing everything with energy and consciousness, anything and everything, right? So hopefully you can take these tools and apply them to anything in your life and then see what the results are and experiment for yourself. Find the ways that work for you, because that's what it's all about. So let's see, my last video was go within or go without, where I break down a process of how you can do this inner world work. And before that, I did a video on the significance of unresolved trauma, why it is this thing that is underlying almost every single condition that we see that we don't enjoy, and how important it is to recognize that and get to the root cause if we'd like to experience true healing. So I don't know about you, but I have spent enough of my time and energy playing what I call spiritual whack-a-mole, or it could be like symptom whack-a-mole, right? Where it's like you get this symptom and boop, it pops up somewhere else. Boop, it pops up somewhere else. If you keep working at the level of effect, you're going to be playing this whack-a-mole game until you go back and have this kind of pattern recognition where you see what these things have in common. What is the underlying energy underneath the surface? So we have to go beyond surface level, get deep, and get our little detective hats on and check out what's going on in the invisible realms, what's going on with the patterning that was imprinted, the programming that was imprinted in the past. And that's what I want to talk about today, is rewriting these trauma-based programs. So if you recall, the very first playlist, actually the very first one wasn't principles, it was just intro. So the principles playlist, I have a video called You Are the Healer. And in that video, I talk about how this is a key principle of light work. You are the one who is healing this trauma from the past. Now, a qualified guide, and I do say qualified, a qualified guide can certainly help you. And so that's, why I'm putting videos out, why I am teaching on topics like this, why I do one-on-one session work, is to help out by providing some structure and holding a space, and supporting, if you're, for folks who are interested in healing but maybe haven't quite developed the skills yet, right? So a good teacher is going to help you develop the skills. It's not about just memorizing what I'm saying. It's all about figuring out how to apply it for yourself in a way that works so that you can step into this energy of healing all of the things. So a qualified guide can help. And I personally, this is my opinion based on my experience, based on what I've seen going on in the community and with my clients and students. I feel that one-on-one mentorship is best when you're looking at rewriting trauma-based programs. So ultimately, you have to do it for yourself. But having a teacher or a guide show you and guide you in a way that actually works, and doing that with you one-on-one so that it can be tailored to your specific needs and what's coming up for you in the moment, is really ideal. So sometimes folks go into healing trauma and they do a plant medicine circle, or they do some group work or ritual work in groups of people. And that's okay, but sometimes there won't be enough individual care. I'm just going to say there's usually not enough individual care to go really deep. And some people, when they get into a group situation like that, they get carried into the group energy kind of, and maybe, okay, so a couple things going on. So the group energy can kind of bring you along for a little ride. I'm sure you've seen this where you're feeling kind of like, and then you get in this group where people are like, yeah, they're all fired up. And then you pick up on some of that energy. So there can be bleed through, especially for people who are very empathic. And a lot of times folks with trauma do have this kind of open energy field where they don't maybe have the best boundaries. They're a little bit spongy. They're a little bit empathic. So if you're not really clear on what's yours, what's somebody else's, that could be a little bit of an issue. You could be trying to process somebody else's stuff. If you don't have somebody holding the space that can give enough individual attention, you could be in like a really triggered state and not getting the kind of guidance that you need. So I don't have issues with folks doing group work. I just want to say, I want to go on the record and say that the best is one-on-one. And in lieu of that, and actually not in lieu of that, the primary is you doing it yourself, because you have to do it yourself. Now, ideally, you work one-on-one with a guide who can teach you how to do that. And then, group things are okay too, but if you go really deep into healing some trauma in a group container, sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back, because then you have to heal all the crap that came up around not having space held for you, and maybe some weird boundary stuff happening, or more like shame dumping happening. So So I'm just saying that, if you can't find a really safe guide, in my opinion, and like I said in that video, you don't have to agree. You could totally disagree with what I'm saying, and maybe there's something else I'm saying that would be a good gem for you. So you don't have to agree with everything I'm saying. I'm just saying that I do recommend getting the guidance that's going to teach you how to do it for yourself, so that you don't feel like you're reliant on a guru or a plant or a certain ritual or circle. You can do it within you. You honestly have everything that is required to do it within you. And I'll let you in on a little secret. You're the only one who has that encoded. You are the only one who knows how to heal this. As far as the specifics go, right? So I can give you a framework, which I am giving you, and you can take that and then you bring your knowledge of what the specifics are. That is all within you, right? Okay. Enough about that. So sometimes I think we feel like, I don't know if I can do it by myself. I don't know if I have what it takes. And trust me, but you don't have to believe me. But I will say, trust me, or just experiment. Don't take my word for it. Tune in and see if this is true. That you're never truly alone. You're never truly alone. When you do this work, remember, light work versus dark work. What even is light work? It's aligning with unity consciousness, aligning with the true organic love and light of creation, aligning with source energy, aligning with the truth of you. So in that, you are never alone, right? I know sometimes it feels like we are, because when something is coming up for healing, it can cause us to re-experience that trauma. Okay, so I'm going to get into that today, what to do when we're getting triggered. Okay, but before I do that, I want to talk about what is at the core of trauma-based programming. So I talked about unresolved trauma being at the core of all of these symptoms that we see manifested. So at the core of all of these programs that get layered on top, the programs that manifest the symptoms, the beliefs, you could call them beliefs, all of the beliefs that we have based on old trauma. So at the core of all that is this energy of toxic shame. So I want to talk about shame. This is really important to understand. Shame and the energy of shame, and when it is helpful and when it is not so helpful. You might even say harmful. Okay, so toxic shame versus healthy shame. So these are some ways we could talk about this, or we could say helpful versus or harmful versus helpful, right? So what is toxic shame? Toxic shame is not about you did something wrong. It's about there's something wrong with you. Okay, so let me break this down a little bit more. So if you do something wrong, like say I just walk up to an innocent person and punch him in the face, and then I feel horrible, like, oh my God, why did I do that? That was so wrong. Well, that's healthy shame. So that is our internal guidance system, our internal ethical alarms going off saying, you know what, like you need to course correct because you're way out of line there, Missy. And that's helpful because shame is a horrible, horrible, horrible feeling. It is the lowest vibrational energy that I can even imagine. When you're in that energy of shame, you just want to die. It's so bad, right? So when you feel so ashamed, if it's healthy shame, it's going to motivate you to make amends, to course correct. You're like, oh my God, because you feel that harm that you did to somebody else. It feels so horrible. You just want to die. So you're not going to cause harm, hopefully, right? So, you know, if you're a psychopath, you're probably not listening to this video anyway. Maybe you might feel differently about it, right? So psychopaths aside, I'm just going to be talking to those who are actually interested in healing stuff. So this is healthy shame, okay? It's healthy because we should feel bad when we do harm. So toxic shame is when we have this feeling of shame, but it's not, it's nebulous. We can't quite tell. We think it's this, we think it's that. It's very shapeshifty and slippery. We might think like, oh, I feel bad about that, but is it that? Maybe it's that. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's everything I do. Maybe it's just me. I'm a loser. I ruined everything. You know, so this kind of toxic shame, it doesn't have a really clear and defined correlation with an action that we know was wrong, right? It's like we're feeling like we did something wrong, but we can't quite tell what it is because it tends to shift around. That right there is a sign that that's not it. That's like the symptom whack-a-mole. So anytime something kind of shapeshifts from one thing to the other, we haven't gotten down to the root of it. Okay. So with the toxic shame, it's not that you did something wrong, it's that you feel like there's something wrong with you. Okay, that's the difference. I did something wrong versus I am wrong. I am bad. That's the energy of toxic shame. Okay. So how do we get this feeling of toxic shame? How do we get this energy of I'm wrong, something wrong with me? So it comes from this place. And oftentimes when we're very young children and we don't usually have really clear memories of it, but if you do that process that I gave you in go within or go without, I share with you how you can go in your imagination, do the inner world work to connect with the origin. So even if you don't get a really clear answer on what it was that occurred, or maybe you just think, oh, I'm just making this up. You are still working the energy to rewrite the trauma-based programs, even if it feels like, I don't know if this really worked. Don't worry about that. It will get more clear as you go, okay? But when we're very young, we are in these situations where we feel very powerless. And the only thing that we can really think of to do is to take on this responsibility and take on this toxic shame. Well, something is screwed up in the situation that we're in, something screwed up with our parents, something screwed up with this person or this situation or this school or whatever. And so that's too overwhelming to have to deal with, or that is untenable, because how can you survive if everything is crazy or chaotic? So there's this tendency to want to take on the responsibility. So if, like, say for example, one of your parents gets really angry and maybe even lashes out at you, maybe they feel some shame and they dump it in your space, or they say, like, you know, something mean, right? We take that on a lot of times as kids, if it's not resolved. So oftentimes it's not resolved. Sometimes it gets worked through and it's resolved, and then it's not an issue. So I'm talking about unresolved trauma, right? So we take it on because there's this feeling of like, that's a thing that I can actually control. And that's the only power that we really have, right? So let's see. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about that in another video. I don't want to get too deep on this for now, because I want to stay with the energy of shame. I don't want to get too into like the toxic authority and control kind of stuff. I'll do that in the next video. Okay, suffice it to say, you know, in childhood is often when it occurs that some kind of, you know, horrible psychic energy gets put in our space. It could be like straight up abuse. It could be violence. It could be sexual abuse. It could be emotional abuse. It could be neglect, you know. So any of these ways, it could be like part of the systemic abuse, things that happen in like the school systems, churches, governmental organizations, things like this, you know, because really the whole system is based on this kind of shaming energy, right? Keep us in our place, right? So a lot of times the parents, when they're not in, when they haven't healed all their shit, they'll like start putting these programs into us when we're young, and oftentimes there's layers of trauma that go along with it that are what imprints it. So if you think about it, for a child, that's so terrorizing, that's so awful, that the child will internalize it as a coping mechanism, right? So I'll talk about that more in another video. So what happens when some toxic shame energy comes up for healing, and we feel this shame, and the shame isn't because we did something wrong, it's because we have this belief that we are wrong, and it's usually based on some traumatic event from the past, right? So what happens when that shame gets triggered is really important to understand. So you see this, I want you to think of it as a big flag that's getting your attention to go and do this inner world process, okay? So this energy of the trauma trigger comes up, and usually, I mean, there are all different kinds of emotional responses. There might be an initial response of fear or freezing or anger, you know, depending on the activation of your sympathetic nervous system and how that usually shows up for you. Some people are fighters, some people are flighters, some people are freezers, some people are fawners. So, you know, you'll know that you've gone into a survival mode, right? And then usually right after that initial response comes this shame spiral. So this is the energy of collapse. So this energy comes up for healing, And it's like we go into this emotional flashback where suddenly when the original, it's like the energy of the original trauma imprint. And that's a lot of times why it seems so surreal and you can't figure out what the fuck just happened, because it's actually, you've gone into like a flashback kind of state. So I talk about that in the previous video. So please go back and review if this is news to you. I talk about emotional flashbacks. So this shame energy comes up. It's the energy of toxic shame, and it starts this like downward spiral, right? It's already a very dense, heavy energy, and the tendency, until we become conscious of it, which we're doing right now, right? The tendency previous to that would be to collapse ourselves into this energy and feel like we're starting to go down into the hell of this shame spiral. So that can show up as like, there are all these stories going through our heads. We get into this really polarized all or nothing kind of thinking, catastrophizing things, very dramatic, like, oh my God, I ruined everything, everything's fucked, you know, this kind of thinking. And like I said, there will be a very strong sympathetic nervous system activation. So when you notice any of that coming up, it's very important to break that pattern. You know, you're like going down this shame spiral. You want to get in there and break that pattern, stop that energy from spiraling. And that is the most important part of this whole teaching that I'm giving you right now, is just break the pattern. Okay. How do you do that? A really quick hack for getting out of that feeling of the survival activation, sympathetic nervous system activation, is to simply take a deep breath, really fill up your lungs, and exhale, drop your energy back down into your body. You might have to do that a few times. Just will yourself to be here now in the present moment. Am I having a flashback? You know, ask yourself these questions, get present. When you take that deep breath, it signals to your nervous system that you're safe, and your body can start to regulate and go into parasympathetic nervous system state, which is what you want. You want to be in that, state of healing, resting, thinking clearly. You cannot think clearly when the sympathetic nervous system is activated. That is not about thinking, it's about kicking some ass or getting the hell out of there, right? So you want to go back into the place where you can have a clearer thinking, a clear thinking. You want to have some clear thinking, okay? So take a deep breath, reset your nervous system, and recognize, right? Remember, rethink, recognize, you are not the past self, but you're experiencing the feelings of the past self. So you can even say something to yourself like, even though I'm feeling this, I am not this. I am feeling this energy, but I am not this energy. I am feeling these emotions, but I am not these emotions. I am thinking these thoughts, but I am not these thoughts, right? So you really want to out-picture these things and disidentify as these things. Your true identity is not any of these things, okay? So get real with who you are, all right? And you can out-picture. I talked about this in the inner world process, the importance of out-picturing the wounded inner child. So when that energy comes up of the trauma trigger, there's a tendency to collapse into it and identify with it because it's so powerful when you experience it. But the really important thing to do is to be like, okay, wait, this isn't me. This is the inner child. See the inner child outside of you. Imagine the inner child outside of you. Feel the inner child outside of you. I say see, but we're not all of us are very visual, but just, use whatever you got. Imagine it, feel it, just affirm it, I am not that. The inner child's out here. And then recognize that only you can help. You are the only one who can help you in this situation. And this is really, really powerful. So this is all going toward reclaiming our inner authority, which I'm going to talk about in the next video, the toxic authority and authentic inner authority. So this is where we're headed with all of this. We're taking back our power. Only you can take back your power, right? It makes sense. Like if I give you your power, that means I'm the one in charge of your power. I can't do that. So you are the one that has to reclaim it. And the way you do that is in that moment when you're just feeling totally crazy, is you stop, take a deep breath, out picture the inner child or the wounded part of self. Could be you from like 5 years ago. It could be you from yesterday, but usually it's a child self. And then in that space, you're making the choice. You are the chooser. You are the one who decides. You are the one who decides, am I going to go into this shame spiral and collapse my energy? Or am I going to stand back up and say, not today, Satan, because I'm taking my power back and I'm going to help that child because I am the only one who can help that child. I'm the only one who knows what they went through, right? So you make that choice. And when you decide, when you say, this is what I'm doing, not that, you make that choice, you flip the switch. That is the key. That's what I'm trying to impress on you. You've got to flip the switch. And only you can flip that switch. You shift your energy. And it sounds really easy, but in the moment, it's really challenging. You feel like you're getting ripped in half. And part of you wants to go that way, part of you wants to go that way. But once you flip that switch, then you can apply your tools, you go through the inner world process, you do your energy work, you say your prayers, you do whatever works for you, right? And there's so many wonderful techniques out there, but none of those techniques are going to be able to be engaged until you make that choice that you're not going to collapse, that you're going to heal all of it now. You're like, the buck stops here, right? So of course you're not doing it all in this moment, but it feels like that because you have to take that responsibility for what is your piece, right? So when we're children, we take on this shaming and this responsibility that was never ours to take on. That was what we did to survive, okay? And now we're changing it. And we're reclaiming our inner authority. We're reparenting our inner child. We're doing better, We're gonna do better. And I'll tell you what, just the willingness to show up, the willingness to do it is the key. That's what I'm talking about breaking that pattern, about flipping that switch, being the one who decides, being the one who chooses. that's you being in your power. That's everything. Anything that comes after that is just kind of cleaning up. That's the main battle right there. You just choose it and you choose it and you choose it until you resolve that energy and it's cleared out. And then there's going to be something else that comes up down the road. But that piece is done, right? Okay, so this is how we reclaim our inner authority. This is how we rewrite those trauma-based programs. We use that inner world process that I gave you in Go Within or Go Without, and we recognize these flags, these opportunities when they arise, and we make that choice. Okay, so I hope this is helpful, and I will be back with a piece on the inner authority, reclaiming inner authority. That's probably what I'm going to call it. So be looking for that coming soon. Thank you so much for being here. And if there's anything that I can support with, feel free to drop me a line, leave me some comments if it's something that could be shared publicly, or you can get in touch with me privately. I love to support with some one-on-one session work if that's what you're feeling called to do. But I'm going to be giving a lot of DIYs in this video series, so please stay tuned for more coming soon. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on Lightworker Training. Bye for now.